You know the phrase that pays. Well, hello, guys. I'm feeling. Oh, hi. I'm feeling very purple tonight, guys. I'm ready. I'm here. I'm able, and I'm willing to lead you, dear viewers, back into the video scope, where your three expert cartoonists, count of 1, 2, 3, reside. Well, hello, welcome back to Pencil to Pencil. You see, I'm starting to get amped up, Stone Cold. I'm ready. Let's get right to it. Let's introduce your charges. I am JAMAR NICHOLAS, your first host. I wear many hats besides this one. I am on the board of the National Cartoon Society and also the Philadelphia chapter chair. Go Birds. On top of that, I also have a dog that barks at anything that moves. I have a graphic novel series at Scholastic Graphics. Leon Extraordinary is the name of the series. I just got some really nice fan mail from a family the other day. It warmed my heart. Worst Friends Forever is the newest book in stores now. Leon 3 to be announced, titled to be announced, will be out this time next year. And I'll make a big deal about it. I'll make a big hullabaloo about it when it's time to drop it. But I'm very excited. Guys, I would be remiss if I did not introduce your favorite internet world heavyweight champion of webcomics. He is my co-host, cohort, and co-conspirator. He has successfully defended his title over 3 continents. It is now recuperating a little bit of a foot injury. So I think he's going to be back in fighting shape soon. Ladies and gentlemen, by God, it's Stone Cold Steve Conley.
Gentlemen, it is so delightful to see you. I can't believe it's Wednesday again. I'm so excited. Last week was really, really good. I really enjoyed it, and everyone was like clamoring for more, and I was among them. So it's lovely to be here. You're all gonna laugh. My name is Steve Conley. I write and draw your 23rd favorite webcomic, The Middle Age, available at Global Comics. Let's add that to the mix. At fables.io, at Webtoons, at Tapas, at Go Comics, and over at middleagecomic.com, and it's on all your little devices and gizmos and doodads. I also make TTRPG stuff like your Intoximancy, your Nibblemancy, and the ongoing Kickstarter that just launched today, Stabracadabra.com. You can check it out at stabracadabra.com. It'll take you right to Kickstarter. But I would be remiss if I didn't introduce the Coco host, who I am crazy for the Coco host.
Crazy. I am
crazy. The maestro of mark making, your favorite, Darkhawk's favorite daddy, I would say. And the creator of 2 daily comic strips, an unheard of feat. Except we heard of a few others last week, but I'm going to continue to say an unheard of feat.
Unheard of, yeah.
The maestro, Mr. Mike Manley.
Hello.
Hello.
Ladies and James.
Well, hello, Mike.
I am a 41-year veteran of drawing everything that could be a comic book. Plus, I was just trying to think the other day how many different types of things that I have drawn, sometimes at the same time. Especially earlier in my career, I was drawing Conan and Muppet Babies and all, like Hot Wheels. And, the early part of my career, I worked on a lot of different things at the same time.
What kind of headspace do you need to be in to switch modes like that in between? Doing, like, you're doing it now. You do it every day. Like, even doing Judge Parker and also doing the Phantom, which those things have nothing to do with each other.
Yes and no. Because I'm not, Judge Parker is still realistic. Phantom's still realistic. But I don't know. I guess because I liked to do so many different things when I was a kid. Like, I really loved Mad Magazine. And I loved all the different kinds of cartoons. You get more Drucker and Jack Davis, but then you'd also get Paul Coker and Don Martin, and so I always liked the different styles of cartooning all my life. So I think it just seemed sort of normal to me. I know maybe other people like, no, I don't like anything that looks like that, or I only like stuff that looks like that. But I always like, drawing in different styles. To me is like fun, So,
but that doesn't kind of like, you don't have to like left brain, right brain, like flutter valve yourself to make that.
No, I've never had that problem. Thankfully, I can sit down and draw, something very realistic, and then sit down and draw something, super cartoony right after that. I've never had that. Maybe it's just the way my brain is wired, because I looked at such a variety of stuff as a kid, and probably mostly cartoony stuff, right? And then as I got older, I started looking at, Neil Adams and, people like that were much more, realistic, but I'm sure as a kid, I was looking at Kirby and, like I said, Mad Magazine, and, you just sort of took everything in, Peanuts, you just took it in as it came in. You didn't necessarily, or at least I didn't, like, sort it like, well, this is better than that because,
right.
Ziggy. Excuse me, I had something that caught my throat. Well, I find it fascinating, and we talk about cartooning as, I don't know, like a big umbrella. There's so many different styles of cartooning, and it's kind of weird to me when there are people who like poo-poo one type of cartooning and love another. Like it's all relative underneath here. So, I could love Kathy Geis-White's cartoons, and I could also love Mobius. You know what I mean? I don't think it's like, it's not pie, right? There's. And
then when Mobius did Kathy, that was the shit right there. She's eating a mushroom and like her head starts growing into like a beast or something,
Well, I will say that, and I don't know if I was talking about this off camera or with you guys, but I think comics fans or even cartoon fans sometimes can get a little insular, right? And you kind of get into your habits of only liking this thing, which starts to push other things away. You know what I mean? If you're just like a giant Mark Silvestri fan, you may not like Bloom County. You know what I'm saying? So I think, as long as you keep yourself open to new stuff, that's what I'm really excited to see. People even like discover manga after all these years. Like, I had no idea. My kids like this stuff, but I like, this.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Part of it, I think, is also that when we were younger, there was the newsstand. And so you never knew what you would find. You'd find all kinds of, there was a much wider variety. You had war books, you had humor books, you had superhero books, you had mystery books, you had so many different types of books. And the direct market kind of boiled all that down to where you sort of, in the end, kind of had mostly superhero books and then maybe some other stuff, mostly licensed stuff, Star Wars, Predator, whatever,
Right.
And, it was pretty typical, I think, as a kid to maybe read a Superman comic and a Batman comic, and then you would read a Sad Sack comic or whatever, or a cartoons series, right?
Oh, those are going to say Hot Stuff, The Littlest Devil.
Right. Yeah. Like, it's funny because I really didn't like that. I loved the Warner Brothers stuff and I liked the Disney stuff. I didn't really like the Richie Rich stuff as a kid. I like it now because I can appreciate it in a way that I couldn't. I think as a kid, it's like, I don't want to read baby comics. I want to read Superman, Space Ghost or something, that I was really into that, and sci-fi stuff. So,
What do you think about that when you bounce off a style? When you see an art style and it doesn't welcome you or it doesn't speak to you? Is that I wonder about that with some cartooning that I saw. I think my initial reaction to John Byrne when he took over Fantastic Four, I think my initial response was that it looked too simple. I had been used to the guys who came before him, and I wonder about that kind of reaction, because I imagine people have that when they see my work, or when fans of Art Adams looking at, I don't know. I remember when I was an Eisner judge, and there was some negative reaction to Darwin Cook, who that was not polished. That was not, not everything had a shine.
I have one, and this is a great place to put that. When McFarlane was doing Marvel work, and then he stopped doing a book, and Eric Larson followed him, and people gave Larson crap because he wasn't McFarlane.
Right.
It happened a couple of times, which is kind of, a circumstantial thing, but there's totally that. How come this guy isn't like the other guy that I like?
Right.
I mean, that always happened. I mean, you have to think about in the 60s when Ditko and Kirby left, Stan Lee tried to get people on the books that could carry the weight, and Romita tried to kind of imitate Ditko a little bit. Always, he was thinking that Ditko would come back, and then they put John Buscema on the Fantastic Four after Romita pitch hit for a couple issues, and they're all trying to do their version of Kirby, but of course nobody can really do Kirby but Kirby. And I think the thing is when a fresh style comes in, probably in the direct market, when you had stuff that was really, I mean, people don't like this. They don't like to switch horses. They don't like to do that. Even the newspaper strip, like when I started Judge Parker, I was told to imitate Ed Barretto, right? And then their theory was that at a certain point, I'm just Mike Manley. But the idea was that, well, if the newspapers go like, hey, wait a minute, this isn't it. I'm going to cancel the strip. So that was always a thing with the strips, is they don't want the strip to look, I'm kind of doing a Cy Berry-esque, like I always say, I sort of feel like I'm playing that role. That's the role of the strip. That's the role that the people who read the strip like. So I wouldn't draw the Phantom in a Todd McFarlane style or a Jack style, because that's not what they want. Although it's weird, when they do the Phantom in comics, they don't draw in a Cy Berry-esque style. They draw in a very modern style with him like all angry and like ripped with muscles and veins on his costume and shit, which I don't, from what I gather, a lot of the classic fans don't really dig that approach. But they're not trying to sell to those people. They're trying to sell to the direct market people who like everybody to be basically like Batman. Everybody's, every character, it's like Wolverine,
I like it.
That's great.
Guys, I want to just make note of something that's going on our stream tonight. So StreamYard, our service that we broadcast from, just added a new feature, which may be confusing some people and your hosts. So now there's the option to have a horizontal or vertical.
To have some whores?
you just short-circuited my brain with that, with my streams. So what I think is there's two streams happening on our YouTube channel at the same time. So if you're looking on your device and it's not like where you want it to be, come out and go back to the YouTube channel and pick the other stream, and you should be good. I hope that makes sense. And maybe this will be something we turn off if it's not really working for us. Like when I set this up, I didn't know it was going to like make two streams.
Well, they didn't show you a preview of the screen to show that you would have both screens on the screen.
Yeah, or well, not that. Well, you know, I'm no rocket wizard, but I just assumed that if you're watching on your phone, it would turn it for your phone, not create two streams that are confusing people. So
how many people are looking at it on their phone? That to me is that would be the question.
Well, it's funny. There are a lot of people. There's little phone icons next to their name. So
Really?
yeah. Steve says I like the vertical formatted sliver. So yeah, that should try it. I'll leave that little crawl up there for a while. So you know, you guys figure that out, and we'll get back to it. So if anybody's like, "Why is it working?" Just look at the doobly doo. All right, guys, we spent way too much time already. We're trying to keep this down to a strong hour and a half. This is something I thought about when I was walking the dog, because that's when most of my thoughts happen, is when I'm walking the dog. And I thought to myself, you know, much like when you used to go through the TV guide back when we were, you know, analog people, you knew when things began and ended. Now I think we've kind of have it on notice that pencil to pencil is 8 p.m. EST, right? Because we say it every time. Wednesdays 8 p.m. EST. We don't say when it's over, right? So I think most of the pencilers and the pencil pushers know that we kind of go to 9:30, and 10 o'clock is like the overtime, like the overflow, right? So, and I really try not to go past 10. But when we have a hard stop at 9:30, like some of our guests are like, "Bro, I'm in California. I gotta eat dinner." Like I understand that. So please, guys, when we kind of get towards the end of that time, you just keep asking questions and stuff. Just be sensitive to what time the show is over.
I think a lot of podcasts are not specific to, like TV. You know, you got a commercial break.
Right. Oh, we should do commercials. That'd be good. So, all right, I'm ADD in the night. So let's get going. So this is part 2, you guys, of what we started last week. Is what we're calling drawing better backgrounds. And our professor Mike Manley is leading us in some instruction. So, Mike, let's just get into it. If I put this on the screen, can you react to it, or do you want to lead me in?
Yeah, we can start. You can start with where to go now? The background, the big background.
Oh, hold on a second. No, I turned everything off. Hold on a second. Thumbnails, yes, and I just the the worksheet.
Yeah.
More background. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, hold on a second. This it?
That's it. That's it. So if you can biggerize that, we'll go through this. So this basically builds off of the one that I showed last week and talked about, and that I also loaded up on my Facebook and my Blue Sky. And basically the whole point of talking about the backgrounds is talking about design, because you can really keep breaking this down. Like I was telling the guys before, I could do actually just one on foliage, right? Just like trees and grass and environments. And that would actually be like a real separate thing. But what I'm really talking about here is storytelling and composition and design, right? Because that's what's really important. And then the stylistic things that we'll start getting into can really widely vary. Like we were looking last week at like the Charles Schultz stuff, or you might look at like Alex Raymond or somebody. Everybody's using the same toolkit, but how and how much they decide, where they decide to use traditional perspective, or they use isometric perspective, or they use what I call design perspective, where things are kind of flat. If you think like Dexter's Lab, and then when we were looking at Peanuts, he had the early Peanut strips where the characters and everything were much more rounded and dimensional, and then within a few years, that went away, and everybody was flat, and you were basically like you were looking at things on a stage. Everything was what I call like a sticker. You know, it's flat. There's no top, no bottom, no side. Like you never see the side of Snoopy's doghouse.
Right.
And we just accept that he's laying on the top of the doghouse, and the doghouse, but does it have a pitched roof? Does it not have a pitched? We don't know. You know, is it up and then flat and then down, or is it just a peaked roof, right? Mm-hmm. And part of it is how you set up your world, how you set up your design aesthetic, your design motif. And so what I'm talking about now in tonight's examples are sort of like big picture stuff. Like in the and these are things that I observed by studying other great cartoonists, and it's all about making your storytelling more interesting, making your backgrounds more interesting, not just sort of having a figure and then there's some kind of just stuff around the figure, right? You can make something much more effective or cool or much more moody, or you can actually be kind of lazy and just fill these kind of blobby shapes around the characters, and it doesn't do anything to enhance the story. You know, it's sort of like in a movie, if you filmed the scene but you didn't do very interesting lighting, you know, you set the lighting up so that it and put some confusing stuff in the background, so you actually get distracted instead of being focused where you should be. And so the first one is just kind of a real basic thing again, of the first thing I do when I read a script and I start to do a layout or a thumbnail, I get shapes. A bridge is a shape, a tree is a shape, a person is a shape, a table is a shape, a picture is a shape, a building is a shape, everything has a shape. So I look at the big shapes, and do those shapes are they interesting? Like a bridge, you know, are they, is there going to be a perspective to it? Is there a bunch of weird details on it? All those things I start thinking about. But the first thing I do is and sometimes even to get an idea, like in the second frame there, I will sketch out a little drawing of the whole thing. Just kind of put it down. And then I can go, oh, look at those. There's a series of arches. Or I like that shape.
What do you mean, Mike, when you say the whole thing? What do you mean when you sketch out the whole thing? The whole strip? The whole page? The whole...
No, the whole like the whole environment. Like the second thing, the second panel there.
Gotcha.
Let's say I wanted a person, they're standing by a river and there's a train and so I kind of would sketch that out very roughly like that. I'm not spending any time. I'm just doing a drawing so I can think about what would the shapes be. Sometimes that comes from looking at your reference, right? If you had a car from 2025, or you had a car from 1957 that had fins on it, right away, those fins are an interesting shape. So I might be thinking about trying to do a composition using the shape of those fins, because those fins are interesting. Do I want an interesting shape in the foreground? Again, interesting shape in the back, interesting shape in the background. So I'm trying to think of how I can take these elements and use them to make an interesting composition. So I try to think of them as the biggest shapes possible. So like I have the foreground shape, the guy standing on or the person standing on. The tree is a shape.
Mhm.
The train trestle is a shape. You know, the river is a shape. The clouds are a shape. They can be different shapes, right? Those are just shapes I just jotted out just to kind of see what I'm playing with, right?
Mike, and real quick, and this is funny because I'm sure all the cartoonists in the room at some point have instructed a kid or tried to, teach somebody how to look at a page or at objects using shapes. But I think it may get away from us as adults. Like you kind of stop thinking about what are the shapes going into this panel versus drawing the thing.
Well, most people false start is they think of detail,
Right.
which is a secondary thing. Shape is a primary thing. So I always say, think of the shape like you had a piece of construction paper. And could you make that composition by taking a pair of scissors and just cutting out the biggest shapes and laying them down?
Right.
Right? If you can do that, then you're on the right track. Now, whether that that bridge is a steel bridge or a brick bridge or a wooden bridge, that's secondary, right? But to begin your layout and your composition, which builds your story, that's how you start out, right? But most people start out detail because that's usually what color, contrast, and detail are what attract most people. In fact, most fans tend to like artists who are very detailed, right? They like detail because detail means effort.
Right.
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 And then also that idea that I couldn't do that, therefore it's impressive. Whereas if you think you could do it, I think that's often a knock on people who have a more simplistic style. People think, oh, I could draw Snoopy,
but you can't.
You can't. Yeah,
Right,
but the instinct is, you could,
Right.
So the third frame.
Oh wait, hold on. You're not. I thought you were.
That composition is based upon me looking at the shapes in the second frame. And so I think, oh, I got that arch. If I wanted to make it more interesting composition, I could have the cast shadow of the train going along on the water. I can use the shape of the cast or occlusion shadow almost aiming right towards the person, the frame of the tree. All that goes to frame your eye right around the central point of that panel or frame, which is the person standing there.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So I started with my big idea. And then seeing the shapes, I start thinking, right? Do I, even something like taking that train and making the train the cast shadow, the train, is more interesting. It's not as literal, right? In the first frame, one of the things that's really important with dialogue, especially in comic strips. And one thing about comic strips is you have the most limited real estate to tell your story, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you have word balloons. So usually the top third of any panel is going to have word balloons in it, right? So what I do if I were thinking like two guys standing and talking in front of a window, I see the window as a frame. Number one, that's a frame, what I call a frame with inside a frame, a composition with inside. So you have the frame of the panel, and then you have a frame inside of a frame, and that box frames the two characters. But I also have their eye line, and the slats of the curtain.
Hold on, I'm going to biggerize that because they didn't hear you on that one, Mike. Hold on a second, they didn't hear you. You got to see this. It's right there, y'all. This is the magic trick. You see it, right? Design's not an accident.
Nope. There really are no accidents in comics, and especially in film. I mean, if you're shooting a documentary, but there are no accidents in Casablanca, and there are no accidents in Star Wars, and there's no accidents in any film where, every second's $100,000 worth of effect shots, right? And what will happen is these things that I'm talking about here and we're talking about last week, eventually those things become instinct. But in the beginning, you have to really think about it, right? So when I look at the slats going back and forth, that helps me focus their eye line. So I've got two things helping me there, right? And even where I put the little pictures at the end there, even when I put the little pictures there, that is another thing that helps you nudge your eye in towards the characters. Right now, and making it black frames them. So you've got black against white. Now I could reverse that and make that white against black. They could be dark in the foreground. We'll talk about that later. But that's my real basic thinking. I'm looking at that composition and going, what can I use to make that interesting, right? So all those choices, just like if you had the little, you always see it in the film noir or in a detective where you have the shadows, cast shadows coming off the curtains or the slats in the window, right?
I'm dabbing. I hit the dab on it. I hit the dab on that shadow.
Right. And so if we scroll down a little bit.
All right, hold on. I gotta minimize. So we're gonna go to the next tier here.
Right. Go to the next tier.
All right.
I would recommend people who really want to study this stuff to look at old black and white films, look at old black and white TV shows, because it's like if you look at the old Star Trek, it's full of this. You look at the new Star Trek, it's boring. The way it's lit, it's all like counter-genre, dark characters against something really light in the background. There's no contrast. There's hardly any contrast. When you look at those old films, one, because they were on a small TV, the contrast is really clear. You look at the first couple of years of Gunsmoke or Perry Mason, any of those you could just sit there and get a pad of paper, freeze it, and just do some quick studies, look at where the light and the shadows are. Something light against dark, something dark against light. That old Hollywood system was genius. You look at some great like Casablanca, or you look at John Ford films, or you look at the Universal monster films. They're just full of this stuff for you basically to take. So in that frame we're looking at now, one of the things I would notice all the time is that they would use something like a shadow. So even though we're seeing him from the back, if you put that shadow at the right height, it focuses his eye and that movement over towards the figure in the background. So if I took that out, it wouldn't be focusing your eye in the same way. Your eye, maybe it would be a word balloon there, but by having that contrast, you'll see this all the time in old movies. right behind where a character is, right behind their head, there will be a shadow. And the shadow usually always stops right around where their eye line is, because that contrast focuses you on the actor's face, on their eyes.
I don't know if I can get rid of that.
No?
Hold on a second. I'm helping you out over here, drawing on stuff. But yeah, go ahead, Mike.
So, and then again, I'm using the shadow. I mean, the frame within a frame behind the guy. And I also use that little bit of contrast, another drop shadow behind his face. Now, by angling it, it adds a little bit of interest. Talk about this later. One of the things that adds a lot of interest to a composition is a triangle. Triangles are great for adding interest. They're very simple, but they're the most interesting shape. If I had made that shadow even, it would have made it much more static, even though this is a static composition. By having a curve and a triangle and putting the contrast behind the character's face, you go right to his face. And you can even do things like have the black of his hair merge with the black of the background, and you still read it because your brain will finish that shape of his head. That is what I call a conscious design choice. You see people like Kniff or Alex Toth do that all the time.
Mm-hmm.
They do that all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so the next one is something you often see, especially in cartoony stuff, but I just chose a more realistic thing. Straight things, mechanical things against something that's round. So you've got the organic of the people, the guy standing there in front of the fireplace with the old lady in the chair.
Mm-hmm.
All right. The fact that you're seeing this very flat background with horizontals and verticals against something that is organic and has curves helps them stand out. Now, again, you could light it like I've done with the previous examples, or you might have a very line Claire style, like a lot of manga or a lot of cartoonier stuff. You don't have to put contrast in, but I think if you're trying to do things that are very dramatic, it does help.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you're doing that and you're using color instead of like black and white, a lot of people do that. They bring color in.
Hey, Mike, I don't mean to cut you off mid-thought, but can you speak on real quick, even with this composition, how there's also enough space for word balloons?
Yes. Well,
talk through that a little bit.
In comics, as opposed to doing film, in film there's no word balloons, but in comics, I learned, or was told in the beginning, you leave about a third of the composition open to put in word balloons. Now, if you have a full script and you start laying out, like when I do Judge Parker or the Phantom, I have a full script. I actually put the word balloons in first. Mm-hmm. I put the type in first, and then I know, okay, now this is how much room I have left. And with that room left, what can I work with? Do I need a background? Sometimes we'll see samples here soon where sometimes you don't need a background, mm-hmm. right? But not having a background is still a choice, right? What I'm always saying is you're always making choices. You're always thinking. Nothing is just by accident, right? And then next frame is another idea of a dark foreground, a white or light middle ground, and a dark background. Mm-hmm. Focus almost like a stage light.
Yeah.
right where so anything that's in that white area is going to stand out. And again, the foreground shapes and the background shapes have to be different in size and complexity. So if you look at the crappily drawn railing, reads as a railing,
Right.
but you're seeing those little white squares or rectangles. The buildings behind that shed basically have the same shape, but they're smaller, right? So scale also plays a big part in this. And so you can decide to marry black on black if there's a texture or there is a difference in the size of the objects. Like there's a fence, and again, this is all very crude, but it works. You can read it. You know, even if you run that pole over something that's black, it still reads as a pole. So shapes can marry together, but depending upon how you design your composition, it will still read as a whole shape. It will read in your mind as a whole shape. So then we can go down to the next one. And here's what I'm talking about, the triangles. You know,
let me line this up. All right. Oh, there you go.
So triangles are the most interesting shape and really a great way to make, and that's a simple 1-point perspective. But then how you light it with those triangles make it really interesting. The triangle is much more interesting than if you had not had an interesting shape there. You know, any sort of cast shadow where you have an object, and you see that all the time in like Orson Welles, The Third Man. There's a lot of Reed. What's his name? The guy that did Odd Man Out and a lot of other great film noir. You will see that very often. Carol Reed, look at his films. Fantastic films, fantastic lighting. A lot of like dark on white, on dark, great cast shadows. They would do these long shadows where you might have somebody at the end of the street running and they're casting this almost really long shadow, almost like something like Gene Colan would draw. And I'm sure a lot of those guys are really influenced by that type of stuff. So something simple like a triangle shape adds a dynamic.
Mike, I'm sorry, Mike. I'm having fun with this. But this is a great panel here where I'd love if you could maybe unwrap real quick for somebody, and I'm not saying like for an amateur or whatever, but like say you're getting pretty proficient in drawing comics, drawing pages, getting your layouts together, getting, you know, a nice establishing shot like this together. Where do you find the boldness to go, I'm going to black out like 40% of this to make that triangle? You know what I'm saying? Like there's got to be a commitment somewhere when you're spotting blacks that you know that this is going to work after you just drew this really beautiful building and street.
Well, you know, when I was younger, what I would do, well, I would always do layouts.
Yeah.
So my layout, I could take a piece of tracing paper and put it over and draw the shadow,
Mm-hmm.
the shape that I wanted.
Mm-hmm.
You just, you know, if you're working digitally, it's really easy. You just put a layer on it. You just draw
Right.
that. You draw
Right.
that, you know. And I think I was very influenced, as I said before, as a kid by Maurice Noble, the guy who used to design all those Chuck Jones cartoons, especially like the Ralph Phillips and How the Grinch Stole Christmas. That stuff just like struck me right away as soon as I saw it. Right?
Didn't we just look at the Duck Tracy short? Wasn't that a Noble?
No, that's Bob Clampett.
Is that Clampett with Neon Doodle? All right.
Yeah, that's Bob Clampett. But I mean, and there's a great book out on Maurice Noble that you can get. But that stuff, he would have these big abstract shapes of color in the background, which are like almost like abstracted stage lighting, right? That really come out of modern art, right? So you can be very literal, and you could actually draw this out. You could place a light and draw the orthogonal lines out and actually light a set that way. You can do that. I've done that where you actually, you pick an angle for the sun and you draw. I had to do that all the time when I was doing backgrounds for animation in order to light stuff. And the main thing is you want to make sure that the overall, even if you cheat it, like this is a little cheated. Overall, what you want to do is make sure that the angle of the shadows is coming from a central point. That might be very far off frame. But you see that in Jack Kirby. He's a great example of a guy who did in comics all these fantastic, wild, crazy black patterns and shadows that were not at all realistic, but they were in the right place for it to work for your eye and make your eye interesting. You could look at somebody like Russ Heath, John Severin. People have a very realistic style, and so their shadows and the placement of their shadows are much more naturalistic. But even they would break stuff sometimes to have an interesting shape, right? And so to me, I'm always looking for, is there something in the background that I can use to make the shape interesting? So, and if it's interesting to me, it's going to be interesting to the reader. It's going to be an interesting, like if you're drawing Gotham City, you're going to have interesting shapes. Just like that Silver Surfer that we looked at last week by Kirby, all those interesting shapes and those buildings and everything. Right. Completely, New York does not look like that. There's no building in New York that ever looked like a Jack Kirby drawing, although evidently there was a building, I forget where it is, supposedly that people said that he based the Bankster building on the Fantastic Fours. And then the next one, again, a very simple thing, a simple frame. That could be a tone, it could be black, but by putting that behind the character's head, you draw attention to his expression. You don't necessarily have to have it touch their eye, but if it goes up near the eye, you see this all the time in Orson Welles. Orson Welles also really influenced. There was a lot of cross-pollination between early comic strips and early film, especially with people like Milton Caniff, who really sort of was the first guy to do, along with Noel Sickles, really started doing continuity in a non-cartoony way, more cinematic way. Right? And they used to call him the Rembrandt of the comic strip, right? And then the next frame is the same thing, except if you were looking down on the person, there could be lines, like a wood floor or something. There might be cast shadows going across it. Again, that gives you a completely different feeling. A cast shadow is always your friend. A simple cast shadow can add focus and interest to any panel, right? So you have a cast shadow is usually in the background, or a cast shadow could go partially over a figure in the foreground, or partially over. You can hide a figure underneath the shadow. That always makes things really interesting. So I'll put this up on my Facebook later, but I wanted to jump. So below that, there's a Batman splash.
Give me 1 second. Let's do a little station ID while I switch frames. All right, Steve, tell the people something.
Well, it looks like we got quite a few likes and thumbs ups and subscribe. So I hope everyone's doing that. Mike, were there specific lessons you learned when assisting Al Williamson in backgrounds that I think of his backgrounds as being particularly lush? Was there something you left his studio with? Some information you left his studio with?
A couple of things. So we can actually, I put a couple of Al things on here. There's
oh, hold on.
A secret agent. So here's a great example of one of his backgrounds.
Mm-hmm.
Al was, even though he drew great, I think his best thing was his sense of design, which is what you see here. So you have a foreground tree, creepy, weird. This is from Star Wars. He was great at drawing this sort of like, these great creepy trees and, all that textural background. And then, the silhouettes of the characters read really well. Again, now this is in the newspaper, so it's not going to be huge, right? And then how he decided not to connect. He didn't draw the outline of the cloud, the dust cloud, right? So you have the silhouette of the building behind, the white cloud. The characters are solid. The ground they're running on is solid. And then you have texture, right? And the texture on the building is not the same amount of detail as the texture on the grass. And again, those little nicks of the negative of the black shape. When you're drawing plants, especially again, not drawing the broccoli trees, right? Of like, what you're really seeing is what really helps read is the shadow shapes, right? So if you blur your eye when you look at this, the detail starts to disappear. And what you see really is the big black shapes. So if you can blur your eye and some of the
sorry, Mike. Go ahead.
So I just thought that was a great example.
It's a great panel.
Yeah. And so what he would do is he would start with a pen, and then he would go in after that with a brush. So he might outline. He probably outlined the figures in maybe one side of the tree, and then he would he'd put the black in, and then he would kind of work his texture into that black. But he was really great at doing those kind of backgrounds.
Beautiful.
You want to look at a couple other Al pages?
Yeah, there's a couple other Al pages on there.
Yeah, I see. Let's do this one.
Okay, so this again is a fantastic sense of design. Look how brilliantly he uses the white space, the negative space. Right? He fills. Can you zoom in on that a little bit?
Yeah.
He really started doing this thing later on, where he basically would eliminate the border, and he the balloons to pull you through. Look, how much he would drop out the background. He would just drop out the background, and that second panel, or the second going into the third panel of the close-up, You've got that sort of abstracty, slashy stuff he did with the brush. Beautiful. And you feel the separation between the figures in the third panel. And then I like even in the first panel how he would do this thing where he would sort of behind Corrigan's figure, he would fade out the black. Then he'd have he had her hair, and then she fades out of her hair down into her shoulder. So look at all that her shoulder is created there by just those couple of at the bottom there, at the bottom left. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Texture, different texture. Those thin white lines in the black area are different than the texture of the hair, the texture of her necklace.
Yeah, the pearls are great. They
Right.
break that up. Yeah.
And the way they drape so naturally there.
Yeah, that's just to me like top level design. You go to the tier below that.
Oh, I'm still looking at this, Mike. You gotta give me a minute.
That beautiful smoke comes behind his head, merges with his face, that white shape,
Mm-hmm.
the scribbly texture you'd always do on his jacket. He was great at textures, use of white, and then the use of textures. And, he would find a swipe of a castle or something like that, right? And he'd put it in there and he would work on it. But he knew how to use a photo in the right way and turn it into something that looked like an Al Williamson drawing. It doesn't look like you're tracing a photo.
Right.
Right?
It becomes an Al Williamson castle.
Right.
That's a Steve Conley castle, if I've ever seen one.
So he has these big areas of white, solid areas of black, and then texture.
Yeah, I like how it's kind of like misted out at the bottom of his panel.
Yeah.
This bleeds into white, like
Right.
fogs out. Right.
That is a technique they used to do, what they call a vignette. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So you see that panel there with the guy running that triangle, a simple shape,
Oh yeah.
a little bit of the car, and then the cross hatching or the tone. I learned stuff like that from studying his work.
Even look at that. Makes your eye go right to the car too.
Right, which then goes right into the next car.
I love it. Yeah.
And then a little bit of crack between the tires of the car and the ground, the white.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't become dead.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you know who he probably got that from? Probably got that from Frank Robbins, because Frank Robbins would do that all the time.
Yeah, I love that. Had the black of the wheels been locked to the black of the ground, it would look like it's parked.
Right. Frank Robbins always did this thing where he lifted his cars up off the ground. It was kind of cartoony, but it added a lot of motion, right? And then look at how much white space, negative space, but beautifully designed, like we saw with Mike Mignola last week. Again, he had to decide, where do I fade out that castle? And I want that where I fade it out to be like a beautiful, interesting shape.
Right.
Well, look at that last out piece. Let me see if I can find it.
The nice thing about that stuff is, even though it has a lot of depth to it, but all those choices that he made were very, very conscious choices. You know, it's funny because he was a guy who couldn't necessarily sit there and explain it to you like I am, but if he drew it and he was talking to you, he could talk about it. He was like a feeling guy. He was like an instinct guy.
Oh, that's it, Mike. I don't have any more owls.
Oh, okay, I thought there was another one, but maybe not.
You want to look at this Johnny Hazard?
Yeah, let's look at this. So this is a fantastic Johnny Hazard Sunday. He's got everything on it I'm talking about. See the car at the top? The top panel, first panel. The wheels are not touching the ground.
Yeah.
And the other thing, can you make that panel the whole thing?
Mm-hmm.
Is another thing I'm talking about here, which is what I call casual drafting. So if you look at the panel borders, those are drawn with a ruler. The narration box is drawn with a ruler. Everything else is drawn freehand.
Mm-hmm.
Now you can take a ruler, like I have this little plastic ruler here that I use because on my Cintiq. So I have this little plastic ruler, and what you can do is you can run your pen along it and kind of
waggle it. Right?
Yeah, and then that will loosen it up, because if you go back to that, if you rule this all, but some people would. Now, some people would use French curves or ship curves. They would do all that straight, right? Like Terry Austin and a lot of Scott Hanna and a lot of real modern, clean inkers would make that very perfect.
Mm-hmm.
But if you did it, it would suddenly stand out in this guy's style. So Al copped a lot of stuff from Robbins like that. The wheels not touching. And this casual drafting, can you blow it up even bigger?
Well, I'll see what I can do, Mike. Let me call down to Scotty here and see what we can do. What, you want me to focus on something, or
just keep going a little bit, just even a little bit closer? All right. So this is what I call the sparkle. These lines are not all touching. And because these lines are not all touching, these little breaks in the lines, it adds a little bit of air to, and a little sparkle, what I would call the sparkle and interest, because you get, these lines are not touching. If you connected all those lines, it would look like a map. It starts to become dead. So all these little gaps in here, well, look how beautifully that tree is inked. But it's not, look how much he didn't attach the roof line to the antenna. There's white space around the antenna of that car, and then those buildings are all inked freehand, and the lines are not all connecting together, right? That adds a lot of interest to your drawing. Now, you might be, when I would work in animation, I would connect all those drawings. I would connect all those lines.
you would have to almost, right?
Right. And if I'm inking, when I was drawing backgrounds on Batman Beyond, you would connect all that, because then somebody would paint it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But this is pen and ink drawing. So
right.
All those little sparks of white add air to the drawing, like between the windshield and the building in the background, between the guy driving, his face. There's all these little sparks of white that add air and interest to the drawing. And if you connected those lines all together, it would look dead.
And this page was also meant to be seen in black and white, right, Mike?
No, this is a color Sunday. So this
Is
is
it Color Sunday?
Oh, we didn't even do the bottom part.
yeah.
All that.
So that's what I call casual drafting. So what you could do is you could rule it all out, and then I'm going to be showing a lot of examples. You could ink it freehand. So he makes that car interesting. He makes the people interesting. He makes the background interesting. Right? There's a lot of interesting textures, a lot of drop shadows.
I like the texture on the characters.
Right. No, you know who ate this stuff up was Toth, and you see this thinking in Chris Samney's work, and Michael Cho. You can go down a little bit more.
Oh, that's nice. Look at that. Oh, with the water killing me, buddy. That's cartoonist crack right there.
and this guy is drawing in a sort of a cartoony, abstract way. All the stuff that's really hard to draw, like oxen and the peasants and that car and like muddy roads. But, you know, all the placement of the blacks and the textures, that's an example of, with that girl, that's an example of what I was talking about. That arc behind her, you go right to her eyes.
Yeah, it's like right there.
Yep. Again, that's if he framed it higher or lower, it wouldn't have been as effective.
Yeah. I'm glad that I discovered that I can draw on this. I'm like John Madden in here. Oh, that's beautiful.
So the backgrounds are very important. And again, a nice use of white space there. Even in something busy, he will have an area of white space, like in the next panel, where the person's throwing the wallet and whatever. He's got all this texture around everything, right? And then he leaves that white, so you read it instantly.
Right. So effective.
I love it. It's so sharp. I hope the pencil pushers are enjoying this episode of Pencil to Pencil, brought to you by 3 expert cartoonists. Can you tell? I like the smoke plume. Mike, even like how the smoke plume leads right back to his face, which frames her inside of it.
Yep.
It's almost like a pinwheel. Now I want to see what happens next week.
They're reprinting all these now. You can go to the next one we should go to is well, there's a Batman. There's one of my Batman splashes.
Hold on, I just saw that. This one? Oh, the splash. Hold on.
Right.
Okay. And Mike, I'll give you a 15-minute warning.
Okay. So again, you know, I had to use when I was working on the book, they wanted the Anton first sort of Gotham, right? So I thought my initial thinking was he's diving down, and the city is a scary place. So all these things coming up are like things that could stab him. Right? So you've got him coming down, those stabby shapes of the buildings, right? Coming up. And then the clouds are going against that, which texturally helps it stand out. And then that shape of the cloud, I want those shapes of the clouds to be interesting, not just kind of. So I'm really paying attention to the negative and positive shapes that they made around his figure. So those were all very conscious choices. And then let's see, let's hop. If you go past that, the next one.
Oh, okay. Hold on. I'm out of my square. Give me 1 second. This we did Al, the color piece. This other Batman, is that what you wanted to look at?
Yeah.
Okay.
So here's a Darwin Cook Batman. And look how much white there is. Right? Like you look at that panel below that one. Perspective, a lot of going up, going down, nice up, looking up, her jumping. So he was obviously, they were going to stat that. Right? The framing of the figure with the moon. I mean, all this is very, and he's doing a much more simplified version of the city than I am. Right? I had a lot more detail in mind. But there again, at that panel you just went down, go back up, with her coming down on the roof, all those interesting shapes layering on top of each other. So you had this dangerous angle looking down, and then when she's landing, it's going to be safe. It's flat. And then you have the bat signal or whatever, that searchlight going up right over the figure. No, you could have drawn that. You could have drawn that more realistically using those same shapes. I don't know if it would have been more effective, because sometimes when you do things simpler, they actually read better and they're more effective, right? It's like if you're looking at a Brian Boland Batman story, he's drawing it so that you really want to look at it.
And there's something really clear about the panel above this one, where the kind of isometric rooftop that she's landing on, that really clearly shows the distance between her and the rooftop.
Yep.
Like any other angle, moving the camera one way or the other, and it wouldn't have been as clear. That's great. And breaking the line of what looks like a spotlight or a searchlight.
Right. There's another one I have on. I don't know if you can find it of her. This is a Batman running across a roof.
Brilliant.
It's not this. No, that's not it.
Go back to that other one. Go back to that one. All right, you can pull it. This is from Dexter's Lab. So I'm really dealing with just pure shape, right? Everything is the tree, those clouds. Everything is really pure shape, right? So I try to make an interesting composition by making the shapes indicate that there's a depth, because that's a show where there is no real perspective. It's all designed perspective.
It's my kind of show,
right? So that panel there with the characters in the center is what I was talking about with the dark on the light, kind of on the dark, right? The colorist didn't quite do things the way I would have done them there. I probably would have made that a different. I would have made that lighter, and then the the hills behind it I would have colored darker. But
Mhm.
that's what I'm talking about. And then the shape of those trees are an interesting cartoony shape.
Mhm.
But I can tell you from having done a lot of landscape painting in the last, almost 20 years, understanding, looking at nature makes your cartooning stronger because you're actually looking at real shapes, not just making the broccoli shapes, right? So Dexter's all about shape, just like Samurai Jack, all about shape. So the more pure, like I'm doing a crowd scene, do I want to draw each individual person? No, I try to simplify it into shapes, right? And it's easier to read that crowd as the shapes in the foreground, and thus just a few people in the background. Again, I think the colorist could have made a little bit more of a separation there.
Mhm.
But that's another thing about comics. You don't get, unless you color it yourself, it's gotta work on your drawing table because sometimes you do drawing, you'll do something and the colorist will completely fuck it up, right?
I was trying to come up with some sort of politic way of saying it, and you get right to the point, Mike. I appreciate you so much.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. I mean, I've had more bad coloring than good coloring in my career, right? It's just because coloring is always the thing that the people who can't write, can't draw, can't ink, but they can color. But a lot of people don't understand color theory. So, I have had some fantastic stuff, like Marie Severin colored the Superman Adventure stuff. So she understood how to color that stuff, But sometimes, and also what looks good on your screen sometimes won't look good on newsprint.
Right.
Let's see. Let's keep us scrolling, boys.
I didn't do much assembly line comics, but I did learn pretty quickly that you had to make each step so good that if the subsequent step diminished it a bit, it would still look okay. You had to kind of, pencils had to be stronger than in case the inks took it down a notch. The inks had to be stronger in case the color didn't quite add to it. If the word balloon was going to cover your favorite part of the drawing, so be it.
And here's another Mignola page where there's hardly any background, but what there is very important.
Mm-hmm.
That use of white space. See, a lot of people think that not drawing something is not drawing, but actually not drawing something requires a lot of thinking.
I keep telling them that, Mike, but they won't listen to me.
So you scroll down. All right.
That's so good.
And you feel the weight of the figure. You feel the motion of the water and the rocks and everything. And there's really not a lot of mark making, but
No.
again, it's design. So some people have a style that doesn't have a ton of marks on it, but then the design, the thinking of the design has to really work to make sure that what's on there will work.
Real quick, America, this is you. Tom Zoller says, at Kubert, we were taught to make the work easier for the guy after you and to make sure everything worked on its own. Nice.
But the thing is that that was especially true back in the day. But I think the problem with the coloring now is that the coloring is so overdone that it actually too often competes with the actual drawing. If you look at what's his name, Stewart, who colors Mike's stuff, he has a very restrained palette. He's not trying to render. very often the modern coloring's first mistake is that it's everything all at once, and they are trying to render on top of your inking, your rendering, and it doesn't always work. Sometimes you don't need that. Most of the time you don't need that, I think. But let's just skip to another one real quick before we run out of time.
Let's see what we have left. What's this one?
Okay, so that's another Dexter's Lab. And
there's a lot going on in this one. I like this.
Right. So this is, I had a big, you can back out a little bit.
Okay.
So you can see the whole thing. So I was thinking.
Oh, sorry. Hold on, sorry. Where'd you go? All right, there it is. All right, go ahead.
This is a meta panel of him going down into the earth. And so I thought of that panel, that background, leading you all the way from the top to the bottom.
That's great.
Right? And so, and then keeping it, those spiky shapes. Again, I spent a lot of time, making those shapes interesting. And the hard thing about Dexter is that because you cannot it's a flat style, so there's a little bit more. You have to cheat your perspective. So basically, with a style like this, everything has to read. If you filled it in with a silhouette, if you filled it in black, you should be able to read what the character is doing. Right? It's and all the things have a very dynamic, non-symmetrical angles to it. There's not a lot of symmetry. You have a lot of asymmetry, and asymmetry makes things interesting. So that's one of the things about working on a style on a show like that, is that all the shapes are sort of asymmetrical and interesting. Where you might draw something like Batman is symmetrical, but Dexter is not symmetrical. He's not really fully dimensional, But I had fun with that page because I got to, I thought of breaking it down to that you had that one big panel, and then the other panels floating on top of it. But then I wanted the shapes in the panel. Again, so it was a little dark. I don't know whether that's just the way the digital version of that turned out. I could probably lighten it up, but
I like how the lamplight is also leading your eye through it. Like this piece right here, right where the lamplight is cutting, through, and then leading us to Dexter falling down the side of the John here.
Yeah, I mean, everything, when you get that simple, everything that you're doing is super important. Right? And on a page like that, my whole point was to lead you down through the page because it's flowing. Right? So everything is leading you from one panel to the next. You have this big S, it's basically an S curve, a backwards S, because that's how we read from left to right, top to bottom. So the first thinking was to make that whole shape of that background lead you down,
right,
to the big final payoff panel of him at the bottom.
Brilliant.
That's it, Mike. Pencils down. You did it. Dare we do another one? Dare we do a part 3? Is that going to be our November?
We could do a part 3 where I talked about doing jungles and plants and trees and environments, because I think that that's another thing that sort of gets short shrift by people sometimes, is designing your foliage and stuff.
I like it.
That's awesome.
I like it. Dude, guys, we did it again. I don't know where the time goes. Mike's alarm keeps telling us it's time to be. We got to get out of here. But guys, I think we're going to run the table. I think we got another Better Backgrounds. This is a series. We might as well just call it that.
This is fantastic.
November is Drawing Better Backgrounds. So
drawing better backs.
Let's run the table. Let's do it next week and see what happens. Just for everybody's calendars, this is my dog's like right on clockwork, scratching on the door. This is a coffee break with JN week, so come back here tomorrow at 9 p.m. EST to watch me drink a cup of coffee and run my mouth. I'm very excited about that. And thank you so much to you for watching, and thank you to Professor Mike for giving us that giving us that good word. And thank you, Steve Conley, for your smiling angelic countenance.
And I'll put this up on my my Facebook and my
yes,
Blue Sky.
And also, guys, thanks for everybody for working with us as StreamYard introduced a new formatting thing. There are 2 streams going on at the same time, but I think we got through it. So, guys, you know what's going to happen. We're going to do this again next week. So we're going to get out of here. We got to wash Kirby hands and get on the road. So thanks so much. See you tomorrow for coffee break. Have a good night.